The Roman Empire is long gone, but some of their hacks still work better than ours. No machines, no power tools, just smart ideas that lasted over 2,000 years. You've probably used some without even knowing. The first one? It's hiding in the buildings that refuse to fall. 2,000 years ago, Romans figured out something that modern engineers are still trying to perfect. They created concrete that actually gets stronger with age. While our modern concrete starts cracking after a few decades, Roman structures are still standing tall. The secret ingredient was volcanic ash mixed with lime and seawater. This created an incredibly durable binding agent that would make any modern construction worker jealous. Talk about aging gracefully. This concrete gets better with time while most of us just get more creaky. The Romans used the super concrete for everything from massive docks to delicate temple columns. The Pantheon in Rome still has the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world after 2,000 years. Romans were basically eyeballing measurements that modern scientists need computers to calculate. Talk about having good instincts. The most fascinating part is that seawater actually makes the concrete stronger. Modern concrete deteriorates rapidly in salt water, but Roman concrete thrives in it. Roman concrete in seawater is like that friend who gets more interesting the longer you know them. Except this friendship has lasted 2,000 years. Building structures that lasted forever was just one way Romans mastered their environment. Long before anyone dreamed of central heating, Romans were living in toasty warm homes during brutal winters. They invented the hypocaust system, which was basically underfloor heating powered by a wood-burning furnace. Middle-class Romans enjoyed heated floors while most of the world was still huddling around fires. The system worked by having a furnace outside the building heat air, which then flowed through hollow spaces beneath the floors and inside the walls. The floors were raised on small brick pillars, creating channels for hot air to circulate. The walls had hollow bricks that allowed warm air to rise and heat rooms evenly. Romans basically turned their houses into giant ovens, except they were the bread staying warm inside. Bathhouses were the crown jewel of hypocaust technology. These weren't just places to get clean. They were social centers where Romans spent hours relaxing in perfectly heated rooms. The bathhouses had different temperature zones, from cool rooms to steaming hot chambers, all controlled by adjusting the furnace and airflow. The furnace operators had to maintain consistent temperatures throughout the day. Basically ancient HVAC technicians, except with more togas and fewer service calls. Wealthy Roman villas had hypocausts in multiple rooms, creating the first whole-house heating systems. Some even had temperature controls where servants could adjust dampers and vents to regulate heat in different areas. Romans had better climate control 2,000 years ago than most college dorms do today. At least their heating actually worked. Keeping warm was important, but Romans knew that staying clean was just as essential for city life. Romans took bathroom business seriously, and thank goodness they did. They built the first comprehensive sewer systems that kept cities clean and disease-free. The famous Cloaca Maxima in Rome was essentially a giant underground river that carried waste away from the city. Public toilets were a revelation in urban planning. Roman public toilets were spacious, well-ventilated buildings with long stone benches that could seat 20 or more people at once. Running water flowed continuously underneath the benches, washing waste away immediately. Romans turned bathroom breaks into board meetings. They literally had group conversations while doing their business. The toilets featured an ingenious design with 2 channels of running water. The main channel under the seats carried away waste, while a smaller channel in front provided clean water for washing. Romans used a tersorium, a sponge attached to a stick, for cleaning. Rome had over 140 public toilets connected to the sewer network. The sewers were large enough for maintenance workers to walk through and were regularly cleaned and inspected. Some sewer tunnels were over 10 feet high and lined with stone blocks, fitted so precisely that they're still watertight today. Roman plumbers built things to last longer than most modern marriages. Private homes of wealthy Romans had indoor toilets connected to the public sewer system. These early flush toilets used a constant flow of water, making them more hygienic than most facilities available until the modern era. Romans essentially solved urban sanitation problems that wouldn't be addressed again in Europe until the 19th century. They were basically 1,000 years ahead on bathroom technology alone. Clean cities needed more than just good plumbing, though. They also required smart solutions for keeping everyone fed. Romans were the masters of making food last without refrigeration. Supplying an empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt meant figuring out how to keep food fresh during long journeys and extended storage periods. Their techniques were so effective that many are still used today. Salting was their go-to method for meat and fish. Romans developed different salt cures for different foods, understanding that salt concentration affected both flavor and preservation time. They created specialized fish sauces by layering fish with salt in large containers and letting them ferment for months. Romans basically invented the first meal prep strategies, except their meals stayed good for months instead of just a weekend. Amphorae were giant clay jars that could hold up to 50 gallons. These weren't just storage vessels, they were precisely engineered preservation systems. The clay was porous enough to allow slow evaporation that concentrated flavors, but tight enough to keep out harmful bacteria. Different shaped amphorae were designed for different foods. Romans had specialized containers for everything. They were basically the ancient version of people who organized their spice racks by color and alphabetical order. Honey was their secret weapon for preserving fruits and vegetables. Romans discovered that honey's natural antibacterial properties could keep food fresh for months. Vinegar was another preservation powerhouse. Romans pickled everything from vegetables to eggs. Romans were fermenting foods before fermentation was cool. They were basically the original hipsters of food preservation, except with better results. Making food last was crucial, but Romans also had to tackle another daily challenge that could be deadly. Romans had a drinking problem. Not the kind you're thinking of, but a water safety problem. They solved it by mixing wine with water, creating a sanitized drink that killed harmful bacteria while keeping people hydrated. This wasn't about getting drunk, it was about staying alive. The standard mixing ratios were carefully calculated. A typical mix was 2 or 3 parts water to 1 part wine, creating a mildly alcoholic beverage that was safe to drink but wouldn't leave you stumbling around. Romans understood that pure wine was too strong for daily consumption, while pure water could be dangerous. Romans figured out how to make water safer by adding alcohol. They were basically the first people to discover that wine is the answer to most of life's problems. Different occasions called for different mixtures. Workers doing physical labor got weaker wine mixtures to stay hydrated without becoming impaired. Soldiers received standardized wine rations mixed with water and sometimes vinegar to create pasca. Romans also added herbs like mint, honey, or spices to their wine mixtures. They were basically making ancient cocktails that happened to save lives. This practice was so widespread that pure water drinking was actually considered unusual in Roman society. Even children drank diluted wine, though their portions contained much less alcohol. Wine dilution also made expensive wine go further, helping make safe drinking water accessible to more people. The Romans essentially created the first systematic approach to water treatment using fermented grapes, proving that sometimes the best medicine really does taste good. Safe drinking water was vital, but Romans needed massive amounts of fresh water for their growing cities. Romans built the ancient world's most impressive plumbing system, bringing fresh mountain water to cities dozens of miles away using nothing but gravity and brilliant engineering. These were precisely calculated water highways that supplied millions of people with clean, fresh water every day. The engineering precision was mind-blowing. Roman aqueducts maintained gradual slopes over incredibly long distances, dropping just a few feet per mile to keep water flowing steadily. The Aqua Claudia stretched over 45 miles from mountain springs to Rome, maintaining consistent gradient that ensured steady water pressure. Romans basically convinced water to flow uphill by building incredibly long, gently sloping water slides, except these slides carried drinking water instead of summer fun. Construction required surveying techniques that wouldn't be matched for over 1,000 years. Roman engineers used specialized tools to measure elevations and angles with remarkable accuracy. They had to account for terrain changes, build bridges across valleys, and tunnel through hills. Roman engineers were so precise with their measurements that they could maintain a gentle slope over dozens of miles. Meanwhile, most people can't hang a picture frame straight on the first try. The aqueducts supplied not just drinking water, but powered fountains, filled public baths, and operated public toilets throughout Roman cities. Rome itself had 11 major aqueducts, delivering over 300 million gallons of water daily, about 50 gallons per person. The aqueducts were built to last forever, and many nearly have. Roman water systems have better uptime than most modern internet connections. Bringing water to the cities was essential, but Romans also needed reliable ways to connect those cities across vast distances. Romans didn't just build roads, they built the foundation of civilization. Their road network connected an empire spanning 3 continents and created the first truly global transportation system. These were engineered highways built to carry heavy traffic for centuries. Roman road construction followed a precise multi-layer system. The bottom layer was sand and clay for drainage, followed by layers of gravel and crushed stone for stability, and topped with carefully fitted paving stones. Each layer served a specific purpose in creating a durable, weather-resistant surface. Romans built roads so well that they're still getting compliments 2,000 years later. Meanwhile, modern roads start developing potholes before the paint on the lane markers is dry. The road network included over 250,000 miles of roads, with major highways radiating out from Rome like spokes on a giant wheel. Every major city, military fort, and trading post was connected to this network. Road engineering included sophisticated drainage systems. Roman roads were built with slightly arched surfaces that shed rainwater into roadside ditches. Underground drainage systems prevented water from undermining the road foundation. Construction teams worked with military precision. Road building was often done by Roman legions during peacetime, proving that soldiers really can build things other than conquest stories. Quality control was enforced through standardized measurements and techniques. Roman roads had consistent widths and mile markers that provided distance information. The roads enabled rapid military deployment, facilitated trade, and spread Roman culture throughout the empire. Many Roman roads are still in use today, either as modern highways built on the same routes or as actual Roman pavement still carrying traffic. These roads have seen more history than most museums. Building roads to connect the empire was one thing, but keeping armies fed while they traveled those roads was another challenge entirely. Roman soldiers were the first to master the art of eating well while marching across continents. Their field rations were designed to be nutritious, portable, and long-lasting. Basically, ancient military meals that actually tasted good and provided real nutrition for months of campaigning. The basic soldier's ration included hardtack biscuits, dried meat, cheese, and grain that could be cooked into porridge or baked into bread. Each item was carefully selected for its nutritional value, shelf life, and weight. A soldier's daily rations provided around 3,000 calories. Roman soldiers basically invented the first energy bars, except their version involved a lot more chewing and came with actual nutritional value. Pasca was the Roman soldier's energy drink, a mixture of vinegar, water, and sometimes honey that provided hydration, vitamins, and antiseptic effects. Vinegar helped prevent scurvy during long campaigns, while the acidity killed harmful bacteria in questionable water sources. Portable mills were revolutionary field equipment. These hand-cranked grain mills allowed soldiers to turn wheat into flour anywhere they camped. Fresh bread was crucial for morale and nutrition during long campaigns. Roman military camps had designated areas for bread baking with portable ovens that could be assembled quickly. They were basically running field bakeries before food trucks were even a dream. Cooking techniques were standardized across the entire Roman military. Soldiers learned specific recipes that ensured consistent nutrition regardless of local ingredients. They could adapt basic rations with local vegetables, meat, or fish while maintaining core nutritional requirements. The Roman military food system was so efficient that armies could campaign for months without supply lines. They were basically the ancient equivalent of being completely self-sufficient, except with swords and shields instead of survival reality shows. Feeding the troops was crucial, but coordinating an empire required something even faster than marching soldiers. Romans created the first express mail service that could deliver messages across continents faster than anyone thought possible. The cursus publicus was essentially ancient express delivery, except it used horses instead of trucks and delivered government messages instead of online shopping orders. The system operated on a relay principle with stations every 10 to 20 miles along major roads. Fresh horses and riders were stationed at each post, allowing messages to travel continuously without stopping for rest. An urgent message could travel from Rome to the English Channel in just 40 days. Romans basically invented the first relay race where the baton was actually important government documents, and losing meant the empire might collapse. Different types of messages got different levels of service. Military dispatches and imperial orders traveled on the fastest routes with the best horses and most experienced riders. Legal documents used regular service, while census data went by slower freight routes. The infrastructure was massive. The postal system required thousands of horses, hundreds of way stations, and a small army of riders, making it basically the ancient equivalent of a shipping company that actually delivered on time. Each station included rest houses for official travelers, supply depots for provisions, and workshops for equipment maintenance. Security was built into the system through official passes and coded messages. Only authorized personnel could use the postal service. The system enabled centralized government control over a massive empire. Provincial governors could receive direct orders from Rome, military commanders could coordinate campaigns, and tax collection could be managed from the capital. Relay stations also served as information hubs where local news was collected and forwarded. Romans basically created the first news network, except their stories were actually important and not about celebrity gossip. Fast communication kept the empire running smoothly, but it all depended on having solid rules that everyone could follow. Romans created the legal system that still governs much of the world today. Their laws weren't just random rules, they were carefully thought out principles that balanced individual rights with social order. Roman legal concepts are so fundamental that most people follow Roman law every time they sign a contract.
Applied to everyone.
The 12 tables
could be
were
studied
Rome's
by
first
ordinary
written
citizens.
laws, created
The
around
tables covered
450
everything from
BC.
property rights
These
to
weren't
family
just royal
relationships that
decrees.
applied to
They
everyone
were public
and
laws
could be
that
studied by
applied to
ordinary
everyone and
citizens.
could be
The
studied by
tables covered
ordinary
everything
citizens.
from property
The
rights
tables covered
to family
everything from
relationships.
property rights
Romans
to
basically
family
wrote the
relationships.
instruction manual.
Romans basically wrote the instruction manual for how to live together without constantly fighting each other, and we're still using their handbook 2,000 years later. Roman legal thinking introduced concepts that seem obvious now but were revolutionary at the time. The presumption of innocence came from Roman courts, the right to legal representation, the importance of evidence over testimony, and proportional punishment all trace back to Roman legal traditions. Contract law was a Roman innovation that enabled complex business relationships across the empire. Romans developed standardized contracts for sales, loans, partnerships, and employment that could be enforced in any Roman court. These legal frameworks made long-distance trade possible on a scale never seen before. Romans basically invented the fine print, except theirs actually made sense. Property rights under Roman law were more sophisticated than most modern systems. Romans distinguished between different types of property ownership, created legal mechanisms for transferring property, and established inheritance laws that protected family wealth across generations. Roman legal procedures emphasized fairness and systematic justice. Courts followed established procedures for hearing evidence, questioning witnesses, and reaching verdicts. Appeals processes allowed citizens to challenge unfair decisions. The influence of Roman law spread far beyond the Roman Empire. Civil law systems in Europe, Latin America, and parts of Asia are based on Roman legal principles, proving that Romans wrote laws so good that half the world is still copying their homework. Romans mastered the art of building things that last, solving problems with brilliant simplicity, and creating systems that still shape our modern world today.